The phone rang at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was watching the news and the weather report had just started. I looked at the screen. Michael. My son. I let it ring. It rang again 3 minutes later. Then again. Then again. On the fifth call, I answered. Mom. His voice was tight, controlled, like he was speaking through his teeth. Are you punishing us? I sat there in my chair, the one with the worn armrest where I always rested my coffee cup. The room felt smaller suddenly. No, I said. I'm not punishing anyone. Then why haven't you called Sarah back? Why didn't you come to dinner last Sunday? Mom, we're all worried about you. Worried. That word sat heavy in my chest. They were worried because I had stopped doing what they expected. I had stopped showing up when summoned. I had stopped making excuses when I couldn't make it. I had stopped explaining myself. I'm fine, Michael. I've just been busy. Busy. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. Doing what? You're retired. You live alone. What could you possibly be busy with? That was the moment. That exact moment. When I realized he didn't see me as a person with a life. He saw me as a woman with empty time that belonged to them. His family. His schedule. His needs. I'd spent 68 years on this earth. 43 of those years had been devoted to being a wife. 45 to being a mother. 12 to being a grandmother. And somewhere in all of that, I'd forgotten how to just be Dorothy. I have to go, Michael. Mom, wait. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back years of water. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. But after a few minutes, after my heart stopped pounding, I realized something. It wasn't a bad silence. It wasn't the kind that came after a fight or a funeral. It was clean. It was open. It was mine. I thought about the dinner last Sunday. Sarah had invited me over, like she did every week. I'd gone, like I always did. I'd brought a pie, like I always did. And I'd sat at the end of the table while everyone talked around me, through me, past me. Michael discussed work. Sarah talked about the kids' school projects. The grandkids were on their tablets. No one asked me a single question. Not one. When I got up to help clear the dishes, Sarah had waved me off. You just sit, Mom. You've done enough. Done enough. As if being there was work. As if my presence was a task I'd completed. I'd driven home that night and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I'd felt something crack then too. A small fracture. A whisper that said, you don't have to keep doing this. But it wasn't until tonight, until Michael's voice dripped with that mix of annoyance and obligation, that the whisper became a shout. I got up from my chair and walked to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea, the kind I liked, the one Sarah always said was too bitter. I sat at my small table and looked around my house. The house I'd lived in for 30 years. The house that still had Tom's fishing hat hanging by the door even though he'd been gone for 6 years. The house that felt like a waiting room more than a home. When had I stopped living here? When had I started just existing between their phone calls and Sunday dinners? I thought about the years after Tom died. How Michael had swooped in with all his plans and concerns. You shouldn't be alone, Mom. Come stay with us for a while. But a while turned into expectations. Babysitting every Thursday. Sunday dinners that weren't optional. Birthday parties and school events where I was the built-in photographer and backup parent. I'd said yes to all of it because I thought that was what family meant. I thought love meant showing up no matter what. I thought being needed was the same as being valued. But tonight, sitting in my kitchen with my bitter tea, I realized I'd been wrong. Love shouldn't feel like a job I couldn't quit. Family shouldn't feel like a debt I'd never finish paying. The phone sat dark and silent on the counter. I knew Michael would call Sarah. Sarah would call Michael back. They'd talk about me like I was a problem to solve. She's acting strange. Maybe she's depressed. Should we be worried about her memory? They wouldn't consider that maybe, just maybe, I was fine. Better than fine. That maybe I was tired of being the grandmother-shaped prop in their lives. Present but not really seen. I finished my tea and washed the cup. I dried it and put it back in the cabinet. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to my bedroom, pulled out an old notebook from my nightstand drawer, and I started writing. I wrote about the last time someone asked me what I wanted. Really wanted. Not what I wanted to bring to dinner or what time worked best for me to babysit, but what I wanted for myself. I couldn't remember. The page stayed blank for a long time. Then I wrote, I want to wake up without an obligation. I want to read a book in the middle of the day. I want to take a walk without telling anyone where I'm going. I want to matter to myself as much as I've mattered to everyone else. I looked at those words for a long time. They felt dangerous. Selfish, even. What kind of grandmother chooses herself? But then I thought about Michael's voice. What could you possibly be busy with? As if my life was a hollow space waiting to be filled with their needs. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. That night, everything shifted. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do differently. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done earning my place at a table where love came with conditions. I was done apologizing for taking up space. I was done shrinking myself to fit into their idea of who I should be. The phone stayed off all night. In the morning, when I finally turned it on, there were 17 missed calls and 9 text messages. I read none of them. Instead, I deleted the notifications and put the phone in a drawer. Then I made myself breakfast. Eggs, the way I liked them. Toast with too much butter. Coffee that was probably too strong. And I ate slowly at my table, looking out the window at the morning light. For the first time in years, I wasn't somebody's mother or grandmother or burden or obligation. I was just me. Just Dorothy. And I could finally breathe again. The first morning after I stopped answering their calls, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. and had no idea what to do with myself. 4 years, my mornings had been scheduled down to the minute. Wake up, check my phone for messages from Sarah about what time she needed me to watch the kids. Make breakfast. Get dressed in something comfortable but presentable in case Michael stopped by unexpectedly. Be ready. Be available. Be waiting. But that morning, there were no messages to check because I hadn't turned on my phone. There was no one to be ready for. No one coming. No one needing. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt something close to panic. What was I supposed to do now? Then I remembered something I used to do years ago, before Tom got sick, before Michael's family became my second job. I used to sit on the front porch in the early morning with a cup of coffee and just watch the world wake up. So that's what I did. I made coffee, wrapped myself in the old blue blanket that usually stayed folded on the couch, and went outside. The air was cool. The street was quiet. A few birds were starting to sing. The newspaper lay in the driveway, but I didn't get it right away. I just sat. I watched Mr. Kimura from across the street leave for his morning walk. He waved. I waved back. I watched the sky change from gray to pink to pale blue. I listened to the wind move through the oak tree in my front yard. And I did nothing else. It felt strange at first. Wrong, even. Like I was wasting time. But after a while, something loosened in my chest. Something I didn't even know was tight. I stayed there for an hour. Maybe longer. When I finally went inside, I felt calmer than I had in months. The phone was still in the drawer. I left it there. I made myself a real breakfast. Pancakes. I never made pancakes anymore because Sarah's kids didn't like them and Michael was always watching his carbs. But I liked pancakes. So I made them, and I ate 3 of them with syrup and butter, sitting at my kitchen table, reading the newspaper I'd finally retrieved from the driveway. There was an article about a community theater putting on a play. There was a notice about a book club at the library. There was a recipe for lemon bread that looked interesting. I cut it out and put it on the refrigerator. When I was done eating, I washed my dishes and stood in my kitchen, looking around. The house was quiet. Not lonely quiet. Just still. And for the first time in a long time, I liked it. I decided to take a walk. I didn't have anywhere to go. That was the point. I just walked. I went down Maple Street, past the Johnsons' house with the garden full of roses. I went past the post office where Linda worked behind the counter. She was probably sorting mail right now, like she did every morning. I went past the bakery. The smell of fresh bread drifted out onto the sidewalk. I stopped and went inside. "Morning, Dorothy," Mrs. Chen said from behind the counter. She owned the bakery with her daughter. "Good morning," I said. I looked at the display case. Croissants. Muffins. Cookies. A beautiful braided loaf that was still warm. "What can I get you?" I almost said, "Nothing, just looking," the way I usually did. But then I stopped. Why shouldn't I get something? I had nowhere to be. No one to feed but myself. "I'll take one of those croissants," I said. "And that braided loaf." Mrs. Chen smiled and packed them up. I paid and walked out with my bag, feeling oddly triumphant. I'd bought bread. For myself. Because I wanted it. I kept walking. Past the library. Past the park where I used to take the grandkids. Past the church where I'd sat through countless services, weddings, funerals. The world was still there, still turning, and I was in it. Not rushing through it to get somewhere else. Just in it. When I got home, my legs were tired in a good way. I made myself lunch. A sandwich with the fresh bread. An apple. Some cheese. I ate it on the porch again because I liked being outside. The phone was still in the drawer. I thought about Michael and Sarah and the kids. I wondered if they were worried. Probably. I wondered if they were angry. Maybe. But mostly, I wondered why I'd spent so many years believing that their worry and anger were my responsibility to fix. I'd raised Michael. I'd done my job. He was a grown man with his own family now. That was supposed to be a good thing. That was supposed to mean I'd succeeded. So why had I spent the last 12 years acting like I still needed to prove something? In the afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to my bookshelf, pulled out a novel I'd bought 6 months ago and never opened, and I read it. Not in quick stolen moments between chores. Not while half listening for the phone. I just read. I read the same page twice at one point, not because I didn't understand it, but because I liked the way the words felt. The rhythm of them. The quiet of sitting there with a book in my hands and no one interrupting. When evening came, I made myself dinner. Just for me. Chicken with lemon and herbs. Rice. Steamed broccoli. I set the table with a real plate and a cloth napkin, not the paper towels I usually used when I ate alone. I ate slowly. I tasted the food. I looked out the window at the oak tree and the darkening sky. After dinner, I turned on the phone. 23 missed calls. 14 text messages. 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I skimmed the texts. Michael saying we need to talk. Sarah asking if I was okay. Michael again saying this is ridiculous. Sarah saying please call us. Michael saying if I didn't hear from you by tomorrow I'm coming over. I typed one message and sent it to both of them. I'm fine. I need some time to myself. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I turned the phone off again. My hands were shaking a little, but not as much as before. This time, the silence after felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. I went back to the porch with my blanket and sat in the dark. The street was quiet now. The stars were starting to come out. I could hear crickets and the distant sound of someone's television through an open window. I wasn't somebody's mother right now. I wasn't somebody's grandmother. I wasn't even somebody's widow, sitting in a house full of memories and waiting for time to pass. I was just Dorothy. A woman sitting on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. And for the first time in years, that was enough. It was a Thursday morning when I heard the knock on the door. Soft, almost hesitant. Not the confident rap of Michael coming to lecture me. Not Sarah's quick knock and enter without waiting for an answer. I put down my coffee and walked to the door. Through the window I could see him. Ethan. My grandson. He was 16 now, tall and gangly, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and holding a brown paper bag. I opened the door. "Hi, Grandma." His voice cracked a little. He looked at his shoes, then at me, then at his shoes again. "Ethan." I didn't move aside to let him in. "Not yet." "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in school?" "I have a free period." He held up the paper bag. "I brought you something. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room and stood there awkwardly, like he'd never been in this house before, even though he'd spent countless afternoons here when he was younger. "Sit down," I said. He sat on the couch. I sat in my chair. We looked at each other. He was a good kid. Quiet. Thoughtful. Not like his younger sister Emma, who was all noise and energy. Ethan was the one who noticed things. Who remembered things. When he was little, he used to help me in the garden, carefully padding dirt around seedlings, asking questions about why plants grew the way they did. "What's in the bag?" I asked. He opened it and pulled out a container. "Cookies. The lemon ones you like. Mom made them." He paused. "Well, I helped." I took the container but didn't open it. "That was nice of you." Silence filled the room. He picked at a loose thread on his jeans. I waited. "They're really worried, Grandma." His voice was quiet. "Mom especially." "I know. She cries sometimes. Late at night. I hear her talking to Dad, saying she doesn't know what she did wrong." Something twisted in my chest, but I kept my face still. This isn't about Sarah doing something wrong. "Then what is it about?" He looked up at me now, and his eyes were so earnest, so full of confusion. "Did we do something? Did I do something?" "Oh, sweetheart, no." I leaned forward. "This has nothing to do with you." "Then why won't you talk to us? Why didn't you come to Sunday dinner? Why won't you answer when Mom calls?" I took a breath. How do you explain this to a 16-year-old? How do you tell your grandson that you spent so many years giving pieces of yourself away that you forgot what was left? "Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Okay." When you think about your future, after high school, after college, what do you want? Not what your parents want. What do you want? He frowned, thinking. "I don't know. Maybe something with computers. Or maybe travel. I've been looking at programs where you can work abroad for a year." "And if your mom said that wasn't practical? That you should stay closer to home? What would you do?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, I'd want to do what I want. But I'd feel bad, you know? Like I was letting them down." "Exactly," I said. "That feeling. That guilt. I've been living with that for a very long time. But you're the grown-up. You can do whatever you want." I smiled, but it was sad. "You'd think so, wouldn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mom thinks you're mad at her." "I'm not mad." "Then what?" "I'm tired, Ethan. I'm tired of being the person everyone expects me to be instead of the person I actually am." He looked confused. "But your grandma. That's who you are." "I'm also Dorothy. I'm also a person who likes to read and take walks and sit on the porch in the morning without anyone needing anything from me. I'm a person who exists outside of being your grandmother or your mother's mother-in-law or your grandfather's widow." I never thought about it like that. Most people don't. I reached for the cookie container and opened it. The lemon scent rose up, sweet and familiar. I took one and bit into it. Sarah did make good cookies. These are delicious. Tell your mom thank you. Does that mean you'll come back? For dinner or whatever? I don't know yet. His face fell. Grandma, please. Everyone's so tense at home. Dad and Mom keep having these quiet conversations that stop when I walk in. Emma keeps asking where you are. It's like something broke, and no one knows how to fix it. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes they're just meant to change. But we're family. His voice got thick. Aren't we still family? That question. That exact question. It hit me harder than anything Michael or Sarah had said. Yes, I said softly. We're always family. But loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Not anymore. I don't understand. I know you don't. And that's okay. I set the cookie down and looked at him. Really looked at him. This boy who was becoming a man. Who would soon make his own choices about what kind of life he wanted. Ethan, when you go off to college or travel, or do whatever it is you decide to do, I want you to remember something. What? You don't owe anyone your entire life. Not even the people you love. Especially not the people you love. He stared at me. Mom says family comes first. Family should come first. But so should you. Those two things can exist at the same time. I paused. I spent a lot of years putting everyone first. Your grandfather, your dad, your mom, you kids. And that was okay for a long time. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person with my own wants and needs. I became a function. A role. And I forgot how to be anything else. So you just left. I didn't leave. I'm right here. In my house. Living my life. I gestured around the room. I just stopped showing up for things that made me feel small. Sunday dinner made you feel small? Yes. Sitting at the end of the table while everyone talked around me. Being told to sit down when I tried to help. Being treated like a nice decoration instead of a real person. I softened my voice. It wasn't intentional. Your parents aren't bad people. But they got used to me being available. And I got used to saying yes to everything. Until I couldn't anymore. Ethan looked down at his hands. Mom's scared, he said quietly. I heard her tell Dad that she's scared you won't forgive her. My throat tightened. There's nothing to forgive. But forgiveness and returning to how things were are not the same thing. So what happens now? I don't know. I'm figuring it out. I reached over and squeezed his hand. But you coming here, bringing me cookies, talking to me like I'm a real person with real feelings, that means more than you know. He squeezed back. I miss you, Grandma. I miss you too, sweetheart. He stayed for another half hour. We talked about school, about his coding project, about the book he was reading for English class. We talked about normal things, easy things, and it felt good. When he stood to leave, he hugged me. A real hug, tight and warm. Are we still family? He asked into my shoulder. Always, I said. But loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself again. He pulled back and nodded, even though I wasn't sure he fully understood. Maybe he would someday. Maybe when he was older and faced his own choices between what people expected and what he needed. I walked him to the door. Grandma. Yes. Do you think you'll ever come back? To dinners and stuff. Maybe. On my terms. When I'm ready. If I want to. He nodded again. Okay. I'll tell them. Thank you for coming, Ethan. And for the cookies. You're welcome. I watched him walk to his car, a beat-up sedan he'd bought with his summer job money. He waved before getting in. I waved back. When I closed the door, I leaned against it and let out a long breath. My eyes stung with tears I wouldn't let fall. This was the hardest part. Not cutting off Michael's phone calls or ignoring Sarah's texts. But seeing the confusion in Ethan's eyes. Knowing that my choices rippled out and touched the people I loved. But I couldn't go back to how things were. I couldn't make myself small again just to make everyone else comfortable. I walked back to my chair and sat down. The cookies were still on the table. I ate another one slowly, tasting the lemon, the butter, the sugar. We were still family. We would always be family. But I was also still me. And that had to be enough. The envelope came on a Saturday. White, crisp, with Sarah's careful handwriting across the front. No return address, but I knew. I'd recognize that handwriting anywhere. Perfect loops, measured slant, the kind of handwriting they don't teach anymore. I found it in the mailbox during my morning walk to get the newspaper. I stood there at the end of the driveway, holding it, feeling the weight of it. Not heavy, but significant. I should have opened it right away. But I didn't. I took it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and went about my morning. Coffee. Breakfast. The newspaper crossword puzzle that I'd been doing every day now that I had the time. The envelope sat there all morning, watching me. After lunch, I finally picked it up. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single card. The front had a picture of a tree with deep roots and wide branches. Inside, Sarah's handwriting again. Dear Mom, I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry. I miss you. The kids miss you. Michael misses you, even if he won't say it. Whatever happened, whatever I said or didn't say, I'm sorry. Can we please start over? Sunday dinner, 5 p.m. I'll make your favorite pot roast. Please come. Please. Love, Sarah. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down on the counter and stared at it. Start over. As if the problem was a single moment, a single argument, something that could be erased and rewritten. As if I could walk back into that dining room and everything would be different because she'd made pot roast. The pot roast wasn't the point. The apology wasn't the point. The point was that nothing would actually change. I'd show up, I'd eat, I'd help clear the table even though she'd tell me to sit, and everything would go back to exactly how it was. Except I'd have given up this fragile new piece I'd been building. This quiet, this space, this life where I got to decide what my days looked like. I thought about calling her. Explaining. But I tried to explain to Michael, and he hadn't heard me. How could I make Sarah understand that I wasn't rejecting them? I was choosing myself. And in a world that had taught me to put everyone else first, those two things looked exactly the same. I left the card on the counter and went to my bedroom. I pulled out the notebook I'd been writing in, the one I'd started the night I hung up on Michael. I'd filled pages since then. Thoughts. Feelings. Things I wanted. Things I didn't want anymore. It had become a kind of compass, this notebook. A way to check in with myself when the guilt got too loud. I wrote, Sarah sent a card. She wants me to come to Sunday dinner. She wants to start over. But I'm not starting over. I'm starting fresh. There's a difference. I sat with that for a while. Then I kept writing. Starting over means going back to the beginning and trying again. Starting fresh means acknowledging that the beginning is over and something new needs to be built. I don't want to go back. I can't go back. Not to who I was. Not to how I felt at that table. Sunday came. I woke up at my usual time now, around 7. The phone was still off. I'd started keeping it off most of the time, only turning it on once a day to check for emergencies. There hadn't been any. I made breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon and apples. I ate on the porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Chen drove by, probably heading to the bakery. Mr. Kimura was already coming back from his walk. 5 o'clock came and went. I was in my kitchen, making my own dinner. Baked salmon with roasted vegetables. A small salad. A glass of wine that I poured myself because I felt like it. I set the table with my good dishes, the ones I usually saved for when company came over. Except I was the company now. I was treating myself like someone worth the effort. As I ate, I thought about them gathering around Sarah's table. Michael carving the pot roast. Sarah watching the door, Maybe, hoping I'd surprise them by showing up late. Ethan knowing I wouldn't come but hoping anyway. Emma asking where I was. The guilt tried to push its way in. Tried to tell me I was selfish. That family didn't abandon each other like this. That I was being cruel. But underneath the guilt was something stronger now. Something that felt like truth. I wasn't abandoning them. I was releasing myself from a role that had stopped fitting years ago. After dinner, I washed my dishes and went to the living room. I pulled out Sarah's card from where I'd left it on the counter and read it one more time. Then I got a pen and paper and wrote my own letter. Not an explanation. Not an apology. Just the truth. Dear Sarah, thank you for the invitation and for the kind words. I'm not ready to come back to Sunday dinners yet. Maybe someday, but not now. This isn't about you or Michael or the kids. This is about me needing to figure out who I am outside of being everyone's answer to everything. I've spent so many years being available, being helpful, being the person everyone could count on, that I forgot how to be a person who mattered to herself. I need this time. I need this space. I hope you can understand, but even if you can't, I need you to respect it. Love, Mom. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then I did something I hadn't done since Tom died. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the old record player he'd bought me for our 10th anniversary. I found the box of records underneath, dusty and forgotten. I pulled out one at random. Frank Sinatra. I put it on and let the music fill the room. And then I danced. Not well. Not gracefully. Just small movements in my living room, swaying to the music, feeling the rhythm in my bones. I felt silly. I felt old. But I also felt alive. When the song ended, I sat down on the couch, breathless and smiling. The phone was off. The house was quiet except for the soft crackle of the record player. Tomorrow I'd mail the letter. Tomorrow Sarah would read it and probably cry. Tomorrow Michael would probably call, angry or hurt or both. But tonight, I'd danced in my own living room. I'd eaten dinner at my own table. I'd chosen peace over belonging, and it had hurt, but it had also felt like the rightest thing I'd done in years. Walking away wasn't rebellion. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't punishment. It was reclamation. Taking back the parts of myself I'd given away for so long I'd forgotten they were mine to give. I sat there on the couch as the record played on, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt whole. The apartment was small. 800 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it had windows. Big ones. And they faced east, which meant morning light poured in like honey, warm and golden and new. I signed the lease on a Wednesday in April. 3 months after the phone call. 2 months after the letter. 1 month after I'd made the decision that staying in Tom's house, in the space where I'd been wife and mother and grandmother for so long, was keeping me tethered to a version of myself I couldn't be anymore. The realtor, a kind woman named Joanne, had tried to talk me out of it. Are you sure, Dorothy? This is a big change. And that house has so much history. So many memories. Exactly, I'd said. She'd looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay then. Let's find you something new. The apartment was in a small complex on the other side of town. Quiet. Older building, but well maintained. There was a little community garden out back and a bench under a maple tree where residents could sit. I moved in on a Saturday. I didn't tell Michael or Sarah I was moving until the day before. The conversation had gone about as well as expected. You're what? Michael's voice had been tight with disbelief. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm very serious. The lease is signed. The movers come tomorrow. But that house is your home. It's where you and Dad. It was our home. Now I need a home that's just mine. Sarah had called 20 minutes later, crying. Mom, please. Don't do this. We can work things out. We can do better. Please. I need to do this, Sarah. For me. But you're so far away now. I'm 20 minutes away. That's not far. It feels far. I'd softened my voice then. I know. But I need this space. Literally and figuratively. The movers had come. I'd packed light, clothes, books, kitchen essentials, the record player, photos. I'd left most of the furniture. Too big, too heavy, too full of the past. I'd bought new things. Small things. Things I'd chosen just for me. The first night in the apartment, I'd slept on an air mattress because my new bed frame hadn't arrived yet. I'd laid there in the dark, listening to different sounds. Different creaks and settles. A different kind of quiet. And I'd felt free. Now, 2 weeks later, I was still unpacking. Still arranging. Still figuring out where things belonged. I'd painted the bathroom blue. Light blue, like the sky on a clear day. Sarah would have said it was too bold, that bathrooms should be neutral. But I liked it. Every time I walked in there, I smiled. I rearranged the kitchen drawers 3 times before I got them right. Silverware on the left, not the right. Wooden spoons in the drawer by the stove, not in the container on the counter. Small changes, but they were my changes. I bought new curtains. Yellow ones, cheerful and bright. I hung them myself, standing on a step stool, measuring twice, proud when they hung straight. I was learning how to live alone. Really alone, not just waiting for the next phone call alone. And it was harder than I expected. Some mornings I woke up and didn't know what to do with the day stretching out in front of me. Some nights the silence felt too big, too empty. But other times, it felt perfect. Like the morning I made pancakes and ate them in bed while reading. Or the evening I took a bath at 4 in the afternoon just because I could. Or the night I stayed up until 2 a.m. watching old movies, and no one was there to tell me I should go to sleep. I met my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, on a Tuesday morning. She was in the garden, using a flowered cane to help her kneel by the tomato plants. She was maybe 75, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and sharp, bright eyes. "You're the new one," she said when she saw me. 3B. That's me. Dorothy. I walked over and extended my hand. She took it with her free hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Anjali Patel. Everyone calls me Mrs. Patel. She looked me up and down, not unkindly. Running from something or toward something. I blinked, surprised by the directness. Excuse me. People who move into these apartments at our age, they're usually doing one or the other. Running from something that hurt them or toward something they've been missing. I thought about it. Toward, I think. Toward myself. She smiled. Good answer. The runners never last long. Too much baggage. She gestured to the garden. You garden. I used to. Years ago. Well, you're welcome to a plot if you want. Plot 7 is open. The woman who had it moved to assisted living last month. I'd like that. Good. Come by tomorrow morning and I'll show you how we do things here. Mrs. Patel became my first real friend in the new place. We gardened together most mornings. She told me about her late husband, about her 2 sons who lived in California and never visited. She didn't sugarcoat things or pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. They're busy with their own lives, she said one morning while we weeded. I could guilt them into coming more often, but what's the point? I want them to visit because they want to, not because they feel obligated. Don't you get lonely? Sometimes. But I'd rather be lonely and honest than surrounded by people who are only there out of duty. Her words stayed with me. I started exploring the neighborhood. There was a library 3 blocks away, small and cozy, with a children's section that was always full of noise and a reading room for adults that was always quiet. I got a library card and checked out books. Mystery novels. Mostly. Stories where problems had solutions and endings made sense. I found a coffee shop called The Daily Grind. The owner, a man named Daniel who looked about 50, made excellent lattes and remembered everyone's names. I started going there twice a week, always ordering the same thing. Latte with extra foam, blueberry scone. You settling in okay? Daniel asked me one morning. I am. It's different, but good different. Different how? I'm not visiting my own life anymore. I'm actually living it. He smiled. That's the best thing I've heard all week. The apartment became mine slowly. The blue bathroom. The yellow curtains. The small bookshelf I'd assembled myself, only getting the instructions wrong once. The coffee mug collection I was starting, picking up a new one every time I went somewhere. The library, the bakery, the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. I put up photos, but not the ones from the old house. I'd taken those with me, but I didn't want to fill my new walls with the past. Instead, I bought a cheap camera and started taking pictures of new things. The view from my window. The maple tree in the courtyard. Mrs. Patel's hands covered in garden soil. My own shadow on the sidewalk during my morning walks. One evening, about a month after I'd moved in, I was sitting on the bench under the maple tree, watching the sunset, when Daniel from the coffee shop walked by. He lived in the complex too, I'd learned. Building A. Mind if I sit? He asked. Please. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then he said, Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. He smiled. Fair. Why'd you move here? You don't seem like someone running from debt or a bad divorce or any of the usual reasons. I was suffocating, I said simply. In my old life. I was everyone's answer to everything, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person. I was just a role, a function. Family. Mostly. My son, his wife, their kids. They needed me, or they thought they did, and I kept saying yes because I thought that's what love meant. Saying yes even when it hurt. And now I'm learning that love can mean saying no. That taking care of myself isn't selfish. That I can be a grandmother and a mother and still be Dorothy. He nodded slowly. I get that. I left a 20-year career in finance 3 years ago. Everyone thought I was crazy. Good money, good benefits, retirement all set up. But I was dying inside. So I cashed out, bought the coffee shop, moved here. Best decision I ever made. Do you regret it? Never. Not once. He looked at me. Do you regret leaving? I thought about it. About Michael's angry calls that I still didn't always answer. About Sarah's hurt texts. About missing Ethan's last basketball game and Emma's school play. About the guilt that still crept in sometimes, usually late at night when the apartment felt too quiet. No, I said. I don't regret it. It hurts sometimes, but it's the right hurt. The kind that comes from growing, not from shrinking. That's a good way to put it. We sat until the sun finished setting and the streetlights came on. When we stood to leave, Daniel said, You're going to be okay, Dorothy. More than okay. How do you know? Because you're not waiting for permission to live your life. You're just living it. That night, I made dinner in my small kitchen. Just pasta with olive oil and garlic, a simple salad, a glass of wine. I ate at my small table, looking out at the lights of the other apartments, thinking about all the lives being lived in all those little spaces. I thought about the old house, probably empty now or sold to a new family who would fill it with their own memories. I thought about Tom and how he'd understand this, how he'd always told me to do what made me happy, even if that had gotten lost somewhere in the years of taking care of him when he was sick. I thought about Michael and Sarah and the kids, eating dinner at their own tables, probably not thinking about me at all, and that was okay. That was how it should be. Their lives went on. Mine went on. We were separate people with separate lives, and that didn't mean we didn't love each other. It just meant I'd stopped making their lives more important than my own. After dinner, I washed my dishes and looked around my apartment. My home. Small and simple and completely mine. Every plate I'd chosen. Every picture I'd hung. Every moment I'd decided how to spend. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in someone else's space, following someone else's rules, fitting myself into someone else's idea of who I should be. I was just Dorothy. In her own home. Living her own life. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The letter came from Ruth on a Tuesday in June. I almost didn't recognize the name on the return address at first. Ruth Kowalski. Then it clicked. Ruth. My best friend from before Tom got sick, before Michael's family became my whole world, before I'd stopped being the kind of person who had friends. We'd lost touch gradually, the way people do. Missed lunches became rescheduled coffee dates, became eventually we'll get together, became nothing at all. I'd thought about her sometimes over the years, wondered how she was, but I'd never reached out. Too busy. Too tired. Too buried in my own shrinking life. I opened the envelope standing right there by the mailbox. Dorothy, it began. I heard through Jean, remember her? That you'd moved. She saw you at the farmer's market and got your new address. I hope you don't mind me writing. I've thought about you so often over the years. I heard about Tom passing, and I'm so sorry. I should have reached out then, but I didn't know what to say. I'm not good with grief, my own or other people's. But I'm writing now because Jean said something that stuck with me. She said you looked happy. Really happy. And I realized I hadn't seen you look that way in years, maybe decades. I don't know what's changed in your life, but I'm glad something has. If you ever want to grab coffee and catch up, I'd love that. But no pressure. Sometimes people are meant to drift apart, and that's okay too. Either way, I'm glad you're doing well. Love, Ruth. I read the letter 3 times standing there in the courtyard. Then I went inside, sat at my small kitchen table, and cried. Not sad crying. The kind of crying that happens when something you didn't know was broken suddenly starts healing. Ruth had seen me. The real me. The one who used to laugh too loud and sing while hanging laundry and believe that joy could fit in small moments. The me I'd been before I'd learned to make myself smaller and quieter and more convenient. I wrote back that same day. Dear Ruth, I do remember Jean, and she's right. I am happy. Happier than I've been in a long time. I'd love to get coffee. How about Saturday at 10? There's a place called The Daily Grind near my apartment. And Ruth. Thank you for remembering who I used to be. I'm trying to remember too. Love. Dorothy. Saturday came. I got to the coffee shop early and sat at a table by the window, nervous in a way I hadn't expected. What if we had nothing to talk about? What if too much time had passed? What if I'd changed too much, or not enough? Then Ruth walked in, and I knew her immediately. Older, grayer, a little rounder, but with the same bright eyes and quick smile. She saw me and waved, and I stood up, and we hugged like no time had passed at all. Look at you, she said, pulling back to study my face. Jean was right. You look happy. I am. Mostly. Mostly is honest. I like mostly. She sat down. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the phone call with Michael. About choosing not to go to Sunday dinners. About moving to the apartment. About Mrs. Patel and the garden and Daniel at the coffee shop. About learning to be still and figuring out who Dorothy was when she wasn't being everyone else's answer to everything. Ruth listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. That took guts. It took desperation. Same thing sometimes. We talked for 3 hours. Ruth told me about her life, her husband who'd retired and was driving her crazy being home all day, her daughter who lived in Seattle, her part-time job at a bookstore that she loved. We laughed about old memories. That time we tried to make bread and nearly burned down her kitchen. The summer we'd taken our kids to the lake and it had rained the entire week. The way we used to meet for lunch every Tuesday and solve the world's problems over sandwiches. Why did we stop? I asked. Life got busy. Tom got sick. Your family needed you. And I. She paused. I should have tried harder. I should have shown up more. But it felt like you were disappearing, and I didn't know how to reach you without making things harder. I was disappearing. I just didn't realize it until recently. Well, you're back now. Different, maybe, but back. When we finally left the coffee shop, Ruth hugged me again. Same time next week. I'd like that. Good. And Dorothy, don't lose yourself again. You're too interesting for that. The next morning, I was in the garden with Mrs. Patel when I heard my name. I looked up, shading my eyes from the sun, and saw Ethan walking across the courtyard. He was carrying something wrapped in paper. Hi, Grandma. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. Mrs. Patel gave me a knowing look and went back to her tomatoes. Ethan, what are you doing here? Brought you something. He held out the package. For your new place. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photo. It took me a moment to recognize it. Me and Tom from maybe 30 years ago, standing in our garden, both of us tan and smiling, dirt on our clothes. I was holding a basket of tomatoes. He had his arm around my shoulders. Where did you get this? Found it in a box in the garage. Mom was going through stuff and was going to throw it out, but I thought you might want it. My throat got tight. Thank you. Thank you. Your apartment's nice, he said, looking around. Small but nice. You want to see it? Yeah. If that's okay. I gave him the tour, all 5 minutes of it. He looked at everything, the blue bathroom, the yellow curtains, the bookshelf I'd assembled myself, the photos I'd taken and hung on the walls. It's very you, he said finally. Is it? I'm still figuring out what that means. It's good though. It feels, I don't know, peaceful. We sat on the bench under the maple tree. I held the photo frame in my lap, looking down at Tom's smile, at my own younger face. Mom misses you, Ethan said. They both do. But Dad's too stubborn to admit it, and Mom's too scared you'll say no if she asks you to come over. What about you? Do you miss me? Yeah. But I also get it. Why you left. Or why you needed space or whatever. He picked at the bench's peeling paint. I'm leaving for college in August. Berkeley. Computer science program. That's wonderful, Ethan. Mom cried when I told her. She tried to hide it, but I heard her. Dad said I should consider schools closer to home, but I want to go. Is that selfish? I thought about my answer carefully. No. It's not selfish. It's necessary. You need to figure out who you are away from them. Away from expectations and family dinners and being the person they've always known. That doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you love yourself too. He looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or permission. You showed me that, he said quietly. That it's okay to choose yourself. My eyes filled with tears. That's the best thing anyone said to me in a long time. He hugged me before he left. Told me he'd come back to visit. Told me he'd text me from college. Told me he was glad I was happy, even if it was hard for everyone else. After he left, I sat on the bench holding the photo. Tom and me in our garden, young and strong and full of plans. That Dorothy had been real. She'd been happy. But she'd also been on her way to disappearing, and she hadn't known it yet. This Dorothy, the one sitting on a bench under a maple tree in a small apartment complex, with dirt under her nails and a grandson who understood her and a friend she was reconnecting with. This Dorothy was real too. Different but real. That evening, I put the photo on my bookshelf. Not in the center, but on the side, where I could see it if I looked but where it didn't dominate the space. The past had its place, but it wasn't the whole story anymore. I made dinner, and while it cooked, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I put a record on. Something upbeat, something with rhythm. And I danced. Slow and clumsy at first, my body remembering and relearning at the same time. But then the music took over, and I let it. I spun in my small kitchen. I swayed by the window. I moved in ways that weren't graceful or coordinated, but were entirely, completely mine. I danced like the woman in that old photo, free and unafraid. I danced like the woman I'd been becoming, stronger and surer. I danced like no one was watching because no one was, and that was exactly right. When the song ended, I was breathless and sweating and smiling so hard my face hurt. I was 70 years old, and I was just beginning. Not beginning over. Not starting from scratch. But beginning from here. From this small apartment. From this hard-won piece. From this version of myself that I'd fought to reclaim. The phone rang. It was in the other room, probably Michael or Sarah. But I didn't rush to answer it. I finished my dance. I took the food off the stove. I poured myself water and drank it slowly. Then I went to check the phone. But whether I answered it or not, whether I ever went back to Sunday dinners or not, whether my family ever fully understood what I'd done or why, none of that determined my worth anymore. I'd learned something crucial in these months of silence and stillness and choosing myself. I was enough. Just as I was. In this small space. Living this quiet life. Being Dorothy. Not someone's mother or grandmother or widow or obligation. Just Dorothy. And for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough. It was everything I needed to be.